Sahana Vavatu Sahano Buntu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditam Astu Mahavidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So there are two issues that I picked up here, unless there are any other questions. One question I have, the wonder about the human body is its health. Because one teardrop is effective, as I have told you before, as a germ killer if it's diluted in 20-liter bucket of water. And even if anything gets past that, we have a kind of conveyor belt system, a cilia there. And if anything gets caught, we are enabled to cough whatever foreign material is there. And then that all gets deposited through a nice valve arrangement into a big pot. And that big pot contains hydrochloric acid. And nothing much can survive that. And then that gets taken off after being churned around nicely into the small intestine. And throughout the whole bloodstream, there are antibodies protecting us. You give yourself a small cut, and immediately your army of antibodies comes into play. The white blood cells come and start the patchwork, internal roads department. So with all of this wonderful arrangement, with the skin itself as a germ killer, and the mucous lining there protecting us against foreign bodies, and an army of antibodies designed to encircle whatever foreign material is there and deal with it nicely, and have an evacuation system that takes all the waste products and disposes of it nicely, and converts all the material, converts whatever it is, let's say pasta, into dark hair or whatever it is, into living cells. With all this wonder and miracle of a human body, how is it that we can fall sick? And so one of us has a cold. Maybe we should consider the cold as a cure. It's a way that the body is trying to deal with it and use the mucous lining, for example, to throw foreign material away. Now, we can take this whole thing for granted. We can take it for granted that we wake up in the morning, we open our eyes, probably the person who normally does it is away on holiday, so we ourselves have to do it. And we are awakened, having had all our problems and so on sorted out in dreams, and all the repairs of our cells taking place unasked. All the digestion taking place without our interference. Having put food in here, we don't follow it up with a spoon and give it a stir. It all happens by itself. This is a wonder called the human body. Then with all of this, how is it that anything can go wrong? And so something is inside us which gives us a level of organization and never goes on holiday, never goes on strike, does it hour after hour, minute after minute, second after second, in our system, lifetime after lifetime. Surely that's a being that is a loving being. Surely that is a being that has invested life force in us and renews all the cells, highly complex things, and makes them have an independent life where every cell can respirate, reproduce, absorb nourishments and nutrients, and take off waste products. With this miracle called the human body, what happens? What doesn't happen is we normally are not appreciative of it because we don't notice all the goings on. If we were to notice it properly, then we'd have thankfulness and appreciation. And that means in the midst of temporary inconvenience, we can still steer the mind toward an attitude of thankfulness. So the Bhagavad Gita gives us a definition. What is yoga? Now, as you probably know, when I'm faced with people who practice so-called yoga, I ask them, whether it's at the European Union for Yoga or other places, what has yoga to do with health and wellness? And it's a shock question because most people think everything. And my answer to this question, hardly anything. Because what yoga simply means a union. And the Bhagavad Gita gives us several definitions. One is quite controversial. It says it's a disunion. It's a separation, viyoga, from the attachment to pain. When we cease pain, that's called yoga. And if you're having pain at the moment, physically, more than likely, psychically, that the mind has pain within it, even though we bypass it, we struggle there. So all of that is pain. We can classify all of that as pain. It's not always there, but it's there from time to time, and sometimes more dominant than other times. Because when we say we want to be happy, it means we're not happy. Otherwise, we wouldn't say we want to be happy. And everybody wants to be happy. And as I often frequently say, I never met anybody who sat down and said, my goal is to be unhappy. So we are all looking for some ideal of perfection. And it seems to me that body is in the way, or its bodily condition from time to time is in the way of it. It's fine when it's working well. When we're well, we don't worry about it. When we're sick, then it's difficult. So there's something that we can do in a preventative way, but with a single attitude, that there's absolutely nothing wrong, only obstacles are in the way. So the whole of life becomes a strategic plan to remove obstacles. Remove obstacles to our physical health, remove obstacles to our mental health, remove obstacles to our spiritual life. Why should we do that? Because intrinsically, spiritual life simply means getting to the root of our own being and expressing it. What is health? Health is acknowledging the intrinsic mechanical good working of the human body and expressing it. What is psychological equilibrium? Understanding that we have an instrument that is capable of discovering many things, and an attention that we can take and direct where we want to yield what we call knowledge, and stand behind that and direct it independently in a masterly way. And so, if it's just an instrument, it means we can tune it and use it. But what's in the way? What is in the way is all kinds of misunderstandings about the perfection that is in us and all around us and pervading us. So earlier we were discussing something to do with struggle. Yeah. So why should we struggle in the midst of this kind of attitudes? Because we don't have this attitude. We think that we are in an isolated position, born independently, nurtured with a long childhood that gives us the opportunity not to engage in struggle. Probably originally by the shores of Africa, with a long childhood playing on the beach. It's the longest childhood of any of the biological species, because we don't have to gather food and we don't have to increase the population. We don't have to propagate the species. And so there's a useful creative process that we have where we can learn the intrinsic goodness of life. And that consists of cultivating a sense of contentment, means thankfulness. So that we are thankful right now for blessings. We can count them every day. We can condition the mind to be completely joyful. absolutely no need to be in a state of pain, psychological disturbance, depression, or any of these negative things, simply by filling up with the positives. Learning the art of doing that. Whenever negative presents itself, we fill up with a positive. That's the art. The art of guiding thought, that when done, is called meditation. But in normal working, waking life, it's called sportsmanship, a game, playing the game of life. So we were discussing earlier a little bit that why is the struggle? Why should we struggle? Because we feel that we are here and we need to get there. Another way of looking at it is, I am here, whatever is here can be expressed. It can be discovered here, not elsewhere. So I become anxious and disturbed because in my daily life, supposing I'm a sports person and I like playing golf, and I'm doing what I'm doing, then while I'm there, I'd rather be playing golf. And so we are engaged in more than likely activity which is out of necessity, and we'd rather be playing. Instead of understanding whatever we're doing can be taken with a sportsmanlike attitude. It itself can be the game, and itself we can do the playing. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives us some definitions. What is yoga? Tells us, uses a phrase. So he says, Samobhava Samatvam Yoga Uchyati. He says, Sitya Sityaha Samo Bhutta Samatva Yoga Uchyate. That is, in the science or the experience of success and failure, equilibrium is truly yoga. Equilibrium of mind, that is yoga. And then what is another thing? Another thing is that yoga, karmasu, kaushalam, that is yoga, is skill in action. In other words, doing things efficiently. Doing things in such a way that we don't get any stress. Imagine if you went through life and all your activities and interactivities, all your interactions with people and places and events went smoothly, and you had a certain attitude that gave you complete equilibrium of mind. That's a kind of art. So that you're doing things to perfection, because all mistakes are because concentration wavers. The mind gets deviated. You're driving a car and you look at the beautiful scenery. Next thing, there's a sudden stop in front of you, and you bang into a car and you have an accident because momentarily your attention was diverted. All the accidents you can trace pretty much to a slight deviation to a great deviation of concentration. In other words, your attention was diverted for a moment. And because we are not this mind and we're not this attention is like a gear, we can deliberately, consciously direct it as we want. And we have to learn the skill of an equilibrium whereby when our attention goes off in one direction, we're able to make a correction. We do it automatically while we're driving. The car steers off to the left. We don't wait till next year to correct it. We don't wait for a post-mortem condition and say, I'll correct it in my next life. We do it there and then. We learn the art of making instantaneous corrections there. That's it. Until it becomes our second nature. We can talk and discuss things and automatically you're steering the car. Not only that, but also you're shifting the gears, not paying much attention to it. Identifying what is a lower gear, a lower way of thinking, putting it in a higher way, and then a higher way also. And so we have three possibilities within the mind, because there are three strands, if you like, to what we call nature. That's all. Only three ingredients are there. And we can register, as far as the mind is concerned, whether the thought is of a lower type, drags us down. And when we notice a certain beginning of a downward spiral, we catch it before it goes all the way. We catch it and then push it upwards, making an upward spiral to the very highest. And along with that, an internal rapture goes with it. With this opportunity of a joy, why don't we use it? Every second we have the opportunity to take all the lower impulses and instincts, which are pain-bearing, which give us sorrow, elevate it into activity, elevate even higher to joy. Joy meaning no pain. Where does pain come from? Selfishness. It comes from concern with egocentricity. When we get out of that, we're completely free. We're not caught up in our restricted field, which is to do with concern, what do people think? How will I perform? What success will I gain? And all of these things are all to do with an egocentric position. And it's a frustrating position because we never come to the end of it. So we always have to get outside that. Why and how? Because we're already outside that. Just as you're not the car, you're independently moving and operating the car. You have to put yourself in a commanding position where you are in control. If you're in control of all your equipment, all your faculties, then you have the freedom to direct it where you want. And where you want might be not in your favor. So we have to determine what is in my favor. This is called discernment, called technically viveka. What is practice? Practice is continuously revaluing all the world that we're sitting in and giving it a new direction. Supposing even in the midst of physical suffering, even in the midst of the body painfully going through its rent. Rent means physical suffering, physical ill health is the rent we pay for the body, is Ramakrishna's language. So we accept it. What cannot be cured has to be endured. But there is something that we can do. So I mentioned cold compress. Cold compress says that toxic material is in the body. How it got there, never mind at this point, but it's there. Next thing, how do we get rid of it? Well, one method is to take the largest organ of the body, namely the skin, and increase its sweating capacity. Selecting a safe area of the body, and when we apply cold on it, a kind of cloth, we put it in cold water, we wring it out. We put it into a rectangle, we put it just below the navel, we put an insulating dry layer on the top, let's say 2 or 3 levels of clothing, and leave it on. And in serious cases, we put it also on the legs, in other words, away from the vital organs of the body. And then we allow the blood to do what it should be doing. In other words, we allow our spiritual inner dimension, which religion calls God, to cure itself. Come on, you do it. Because I cannot physically pump the heart. I cannot do it. I can't squeeze it. It does it by itself. Something is doing it. Something is mobilizing the viscera, the diaphragm muscle, moving it up and down, enabling inflation and deflation of the lungs, allowing us to take advantage of a cosmic arrangement. The tree is giving us oxygen, doesn't require it, taking all the carbohydrates and what have you, manufacturing carbohydrates from it, and giving us the oxygen. It wants the carbon. It nicely gives us the oxygen as a free gift, and we huff and puff on the oxygen. And we give up back the carbon dioxide. And the trees use that carbon, and it's a wonderful symbiotic arrangement. See, all of this arrangement we hardly notice. When we start noticing it with a high level of appreciation, we also get an inner joy from it. We have to observe what is there, we have to appreciate what is there and be thankful. That's the formula. We can't be appreciative of something that we never really noticed. And so the art of noticing something that is a normal everyday thing that we take for granted and seeing the specialness in it and seeing the arrangement in it. And when we pursue this line, understanding the specialness of it, tracing it back to its origin, this is all called the meditative process. Looking at the inwardness of something until we arrive at a source. And when we arrive at a source, not the outer source, when we arrive at the source, then we get a feeling of unity which is equivalent to bliss. Now we have had the formula, even temporarily, of the happiness that we're looking for. Because it's equivalent to freedom, a sense of freedom, an inherent joy. And what that says is bliss is our own nature. That means the whole of our lively pursuit is to find our own nature as truly existent, as consciousness and bliss.
So, but you said that you have to acknowledge that. So if there is a physical pain or there is physical pain, you acknowledge that there is suffering or that there is a struggle. But sometimes we're so absorbed in our own lives and our own worlds, say that psychological suffering is there. And we don't even realize that you have to understand and realize that there's psychological suffering and the impact that that has on you in order to go on that journey.
Yes, but the act of observing means I'm not involved in it. So we have to acknowledge when there is suffering, we feel it, we acknowledge it's there before we can deal with it. Yes, that's the question. Yes, but also what it says is, I'm not that. And it is that level of detachment. So what is practice? Practice consists of discernment, called viveka, discrimination, and detachment. Detachment follows immediately, actually. Detachment is another way of saying renunciation. So their body is suffering. Is there a way that I can withdraw from that, ideally? Is it easy? It requires practice. It requires constant rehearsal to say, I'm not the body, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that.
But most people take ownership of it. They go, this is my pain.
Not take ownership, they take identification with it.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
ownership would be a different thing.
I understand,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
So they identify with it as their own.
Yes.
It's their pain.
Yeah.
And is it true? So I suppose back to what we were talking about earlier on, is this why we need a real understanding of, in the world we live in right now, this crazy, chaotic world where nobody really understands faith, nobody really understands the cosmic mind, nobody really understands how do we deal with this process? How do I not make it mine? Because I feel it, you don't feel it, therefore it is mine, and I can't discriminate. So how do we help people understand? And like this, what we were talking about earlier on, there's a huge need for people to really understand this without the tag of religion or spirituality.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't get a headache over that because I don't interfere with other people's business. And we're all struggling. You can see it like molecules in a river. They're all flowing in a direction, But it's never exactly smooth because it can bang into a rock here, it can go off there, and so on and so forth. It doesn't go straight toward the ocean, for example. So there are delaying factors and so on. And what I was saying last night is this is what we call evolution. Evolution means there's some perfection within us. We can tell children like this. See, life is a journey. We are the traveler. We come from God and we go to God. You know, put it in religious language. That means it's a circular process, not a linear process. We don't start here, we end there, and we are desperately struggling to go there. We have to acknowledge one thing, that frustration is on the way, and it's part of what nature is. Nature is designed not to be smooth. Acknowledging that, we find a way around it. Water naturally finds a way around. But when we resist a flow, we come across difficulties. Now, most people are in that situation. But that doesn't mean to say that the inherent potential doesn't wish to move forward. It does, because we all have the ideal of perfection. We all have this urge to move forward. And there will be there'll be delaying things, no doubt. So this is why in this Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda, I often quote it. At the very end, he gives a commentary about nature. And it's a beautiful thing. There's a flow of nature like a mother, and it takes the self-forgetting soul by the hand and leads it onwards, whether we know it or not. So we learn much more from pain than we do from pleasure and joy. Taking that, we see, let's find a way around it. Yes, when pain occurs, we acknowledge it automatically because pain, that's what pain is. Pain is saying, hey, I exist. Okay. And then how do we deal with it? Of course, we can ask why, which is useless. Why not? What next? What do we do here and now? And with all the equipment that we're given, we find a way around it with the resources at hand. Now, there are many resources. Medical field is a resource. But thinking is the primary resource we have. Revaluing things. So I give you some examples. I think it was Swami Purnananda who had a big boil and they were going to operate on it. And they said, well, he said, don't give me anything because I know how to withdraw my mind. And they said, well, okay, but then, you know, how if you withdraw completely your consciousness from the body, then how do we know when things are finished, you know? And he says, well, I tell you what, I'm paraphrasing quite a bit. He says, all right, well, you know, I'll have enough consciousness to experience a little bit of the pain and that will bring me back, that kind of thing. See, the point is this. We have the capacity to withdraw our consciousness. We do it every night. But we don't do it consciously, we do it unconsciously in a sense. So what we do is we drift across, we vacate our passport identity, and we take in another scenario called dream, and that yields to a completely blank state, a deep sleep, where no identity is there. Now we do it also with anesthetics. Anesthetics, we do it chemically. That part of the brain that has a correlation to consciousness is blanked off, and we don't feel anything as an operation we can do. Or even local anesthetic, that same thing. So what it means is, can we voluntarily do it? And theoretically, yes, because I am not the instrument. I have to get used to registering the instrumentality of the body. Now, a certain quality of endurance also has to be there as well. There's no doubt. What cannot be cured has to be endured. And this quality is called titiksha. What that means is, the only thing we can do with it is take our awareness and as much as possible steer it in a deeper, more profound way wherever we can. And we can even use that pain and suffering. This comes out predominantly in the theology of Christianity, for example, where we say suffering being inevitable, let us take it on. There are self-sacrificing people who voluntarily take on the suffering of another, saying, I'll endure it, on the basis that there are many lives. In this life, I may as well sacrifice this life for another. You do that. So we can use a technique, which is contained in Bhakti Yoga, for example, of taking that suffering and offering it to our divine ideal, is one method of doing it. So various things are there, and we have to, but behind it, we have to always be aware that there's a perfection moving things forward. See, the question of pain is a difficult one, there's no doubt. And we have to have compassion with it as well. But by the same token, we have to go deeper than that, shift our thinking, and understand that behind that is an inherent perfection that has no suffering. And I can, with a degree of training, means rehearsal of discernment and detachment, withdraw to a place of poise where I observe. If I can practice that even momentarily, time and time again, it eases things off and puts me in more of a commanding position.
So how would you guide somebody who, when we talk about pain, before we get to what we understand as pain or painful, the smaller, lighter stuff that is pain, and how do we channel and handle that without, because to try and understand how to deal with severe pain, or we wait until it gets to a point that we go, well.
So what do we do with a child? The child falls down and scrapes the knee and cries.
Yes.
And the wise parent will take the child up and say, look at the tree, look at this, look at that. Oh, never mind, never mind. And the child's attention gets diverted. As long as our attention is diverted, as soon as all that diversion is gone, the pain comes back. So where should we divert our attention to? We should have diverted in a penetrating way to the source of our own being and the source of everything, seeing that divine self, as we call it, in all things, in all beings, in all people, in all places, and so on. What is the merit of that? An equilibrium, equality of vision, where we don't see any class distinctions. We don't see any difference of, we don't put people in category. This person is good, this person is bad. With a penetrating vision, we see, Lord, you are the perfection there, sitting there behind. There's an episode you see in the Bhagavatam, find that, the last message of Krishna, as it's published separately, a conversation between Krishna and Uddhava. And there it's told, if you have this penetrating vision, you won't see any distinction between the very lowest and the very highest. You won't see any difference between an elephant and a donkey or a dog. And furthermore, what practice will you have? Very radical. When you see a donkey, for example, then prostrate before the donkey. Take an animal that you feel is a beast of burden, or some animal that you may have little regard for, in your ignorance, not seeing the perfection there, not have a penetrating vision and seeing, oh Lord, there you are, the self of the universe is there. You practice that. Now, you look pretty funny if you do that literally. So you internally can do it. And that means then, we have an example from the 19th century mystic, Ramakrishna Paramahansa. He goes to the house of the lowest caste, knowing that this man will object, at night, in the dead of night, and cleans the man's latrine and dries it with his own long hair. exhibiting to all of us how we should behave, how we should cultivate this ideal of humility. Humility has no egoism within it. You know the saying, I'm humble, I'm proud of it. See, contradiction in terms. Most people might have that kind of opinion. See, look, see, I want to tell you something privately. You see, I gave a lot of money to the hospital. Don't tell anybody. Means tell everybody, please. Tell people what a good person I am, and let me have a plaque in the hospital, please. Thank you. So most of us are like that because of a misidentification with the instrumentation that we have, namely body-mind complex. We don't make the mistake about any other ownership where we say my, where put a possessive thing in. My shoe, my clothing, my shirt, my dress. Somehow we do it with the body. So egoism, just all of this is repetition naturally for all of you. But what is egoism? It's the identification of the seer with the seen, the subject with the object. And that keeps us continuously in a loop. And we can't get out of it unless we change our habits. And that requires us to look at things in a different way, an unusual way. Instead of seeing the world as we conventionally see it, we have to see it in a different way. And with a penetrating vision, we have to see, in the words of the Isha Upanishad, see the self in all beings and all beings in the self, repeated in many passages in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita also. That's the only practice. Learn to have a penetrating vision, and if you want something to be transformed, even the mere wish about it, see things in the correct light, and have a penetrating vision beyond the borders of the suffering body, the suffering mind, and there, the perfection which is there, as I said many times, that puts you in the past, already accomplished. Perfection already there, nothing to be achieved, nothing to be changed, nothing to be accomplished. Thanks, all is there. I want this, already accomplished. And as I probably mentioned in some other talks, see, Jesus puts it like that. An episode where Jesus is going, there's a fig tree there, and Jesus somehow curses the fig tree. And then the following day, because it's not bearing fruit, the following day, the disciples are astonished. It's now all withered up. And Jesus says, oh, greater things than this can you accomplish. Then he says, if you want that mountain to move, it will move. Then he gives a formula. Believe that it's already accomplished, already there, finished. That level of faith, that is called faith. Now people learn that by experience because the whole of this painful suffering is a means of making us stronger, is a means of giving us an opportunity to shift our position to another way, in another way, and to cultivate this quality of endurance. And if there is some destiny in it, if you will, is to say, I can empathize with somebody who is suffering because I know what it is myself. I've been through it also. So the whole essence of Buddha was like that. He never suffered, as far as we know, according to the biography of Buddha. Shakyamuni, silent one of the Shakya clan, who he became, silent one, a Muni, because there's nothing to talk about. So Gautama Siddhartha, the spoiled prince, explores the world beyond his small cocoon, his protective bubble, and he sees all these phenomena. What's wrong with this person? What's wrong with that person? All these examples he sees. That person looks peculiar. What's wrong with him? Oh, he's old. Really? Is he the only one on the planet like that? No. Actually, everybody who is born and has youthfulness will progressively get like that if they survive. And what's wrong with this man? I see people carrying him. Oh, he's dead. Dead? What is that? Yes, everybody that's born will die. It's a fact. The last phenomena will be somebody who has decided to take a different course of action, go on a self-discovery trail, and find out what is the truth. Some wandering monk, some sadhu, some holy man there, what is he doing? He's trying to find out what is behind all this. He's investigating. He's decided to think differently. Then Gautama Siddhartha goes back to his palace in a different mood, a despondent mood, because he's been presented with all this pain and suffering. And his ultimate conclusion, after going through all the extremes of ascetic disciplines, finds a middle way and comes to the conclusion, easily teachable, on one hand only. Four Noble Truths. Suffering is a fact. There's a cause. What is the cause? Desire. Desire is the primary cause. And that means that there's an inevitable law of consequences. So there's a giving and there's a receiving. There's a sowing and there's a reaping. What you sow, you'll get back. Hate and you'll be hated. Love and you'll be loved. Don't inquire exactly what was it. Your condition is as it is now. Is there something you can do about it? Yes. You can give up all that desire, because all that desire means you're not getting anywhere. And if desire is the cause of suffering, as long as there's desire, there'll be suffering. And desire is not necessarily for an object. It can be very subtle. A desire to be appreciated, a desire to be thanked, the desire to achieve. All these are desires. Where we, on the Enneagram, we identify 9 types of desires. And the desire is balanced against I'm pulling away from something I fear. I don't like the thing that is repulsive to me. I resist that. And I rather go to the thing that will give me pleasure. Not knowing the trap, because the pleasure will actually be painful. It's good for a time being, for a moment. But after that, even if there's a pain because of the absence of it, there's also the repetitive desire to continuously do it. And when that continuation is intensified, we call it addiction. How to get out of that? So then he describes 2 hands, 8-fold way. The old 8-fold path. This is how you get out of it. In a clinical, medical way, he describes it. There is suffering. You go to a doctor, you say, I'm suffering. Next thing. Is there a cause? Yes, there's a cause. Next is there a way out? Yes. Can you tell me exactly? Yes. Elevate the mind in a right way. Right occupation, right thinking, right concentration, right meditation, all of these kinds of things. Refine the mind. In other words, Buddha is saying what every teacher is saying, and that is, please clean the mind, clarify the mind. When you clarify the mind, things become settled. Things become resolved. Things become clarified, not muddied, not confused. And then once you've done that, what is underneath will be self-evident. That self-evidence is what we call enlightened intellect, Buddha. And one who has an enlightened buddhi intellect. You can view the intellect as something like a kind of environment, internal environment, which appears to have its own light, but is actually borrowed light, a reflected light from something deeper. And so that deeper thing is your own real nature, and we're all destined to discover it. Just as a river is destined eventually to get to the sea. But rocks will be in the way, there's no doubt. And so instead of complaining about thorns on the road, put tough shoes on. Instead of saying there are potholes, use your four-wheel drive. What's the Irish saying? It's better to light a candle than curse the dog. You have the equipment, you use it. No good having a car if you keep it just in the garage or complain about it. Use it. So this is the equipment. So by increasing the capacity, coming back to the details of this naturopathic remedy, by increasing the capacity of the skin to sweat, we find that all the waste material that the body says, I don't have any avenues except the mucus lining. Let me divert all of that away as sweat. Try to do that. We do it, drink a lot of water and so on and so forth. Much better if we can to prevent it completely by keeping the body healthy as much as we can. So, well, there's room for more questions.
Swami, I have one little question.
Wonderful. Yes, okay.
Swami, it's just about, I work a lot with young people, as you know, and like today I had 3 that are struggling with suicide ideation.
Yes.
And they're all 14, 15. And it just seems to be that's quite common now. And it's very sad, but it's very common. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. Is it our modern day lives? Social media and all of that?
Well, I don't know enough about that to give an accurate answer. But generally speaking, somebody who goes into a spiral of depression sufficient enough for that desperate move, we have to find a way of getting them to view something a little differently. And the first point of action that we can do is give the person self-confidence. And I'm taking the clue really from the Krishna's answer to Arjun's despondency. Because somebody in that condition, the first thing, Krishna is going to give him self-confidence. Where does that self-confidence come from? We have to persuade the person in some way that they are much more than their sufferings and that they are, in fact, the immortal self. And we have to couch it in terms which are comprehensible to the person, particularly at the age of 14, so that they understand it. So it might be things like questions. So, what do you feel that you can do that nobody else can do? Now, that's a tough question for somebody who is mentally disturbed. So, you know the answer. What I do when I have children in front of me, I ask them, do you have fingerprints? They all look at their hands and they're all surprised they have fingerprints. Well, you see, that's a mark of your individuality. Before you were born, they were never seen. And when you die, they'll never be seen again. There's something you can do that nobody else has ever done, that nobody else can do now, nobody else can do in the future. And so get them to explore that and find out, what is their uniqueness. And even, you see, even a person on the gallows, the Lord of the universe still decides to invest life. The nails don't stop growing. The food, the last meal doesn't stop. The digestion continues. So as long as the life giver is investing life in an individual, there's a worthwhile destiny to persuade a youngster and all youngsters that there is something that they can do uniquely with their set of skills and talents that nobody else can do. And that behind it all is some thing that is full and free and perfect. One way of getting them to understand it is asking the question, who digests your food? Who pumps your heart? Something isn't there. Can you not have a level of appreciation about it? But they will say, you see, they'll come back to all the stresses that they may be undergoing. And some common ones that I have heard about would be maybe living up to unrealistic achievement expectations, putting pressure in terms of study, maybe peer pressure, bullying. Various factors are like that. And so, yes, naturally, you have to explore those things, but always counter it, because we have a level of inner strength. Strength, courage, self-confidence, these are the most important spiritual qualities that we can cultivate. So to encourage, now the way we encourage is praise wherever we can. Give a person tremendous self-confidence. And that's the only thing we can do. Self-confidence finds its peak when a person understands the nature of the internal self. Of course, that's all philosophy, and the 14-year-old will not understand it necessarily in these terms. So there has to be a way of conveying that so that it becomes comprehensible. Even adults, I'll take them outside the door, and in front of our ashram there's a green, and I'll say, what do you see? And they'll come and say, grass. No, did you notice the shades, the colors which are there? Did you notice the blueness of the sky, or maybe the cloud formations? Did you wonder how grass can just grow? Did you wonder how there may be some insect life below that? Do you wonder how that has the magic of catching all the energy from the sun and converting it through photosynthesis? There's a whole meditation. It's only we never observed it. We just took it for granted. Grass, so what? But there's a whole miracle there. So by increasing the level of appreciation, self-appreciation, and appreciation for the environment, everything around. And that requires repetition and coaching until a person is convinced, I'm worthwhile and I can handle everything. I am strong, full, wise, full, free, and so on and so forth. I get people to repeat these words as well. Strong, full, wise, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony. As long as you repeat these words, these qualities start vibrating in you. So that's all I can say on that.
Thanks, Swami.
See, the worst thing we can do is drag them down again and explore and go into the past and explore the why, the why, the why. Why not? What next? Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you so
Enjoy
much.
the day.